Good evening, everyone. The second one is over there. How is everybody? Happy New Year. I feel all month of January one can say Happy New Year. Till we make it to the Chinese New Year, and then I start saying New Year again. And then it's the first day of spring, which is the Persian New Year. So it kind of keeps me going for about 3 months. I feel it pretty good, Juju. Thank you so much. You all, look at your fan club. This is all because of you three. Yeah. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We just came out of a guided meditation. So if anyone stayed after guided meditation, you're very peaceful and calm. You're gonna have it right here. Yeah. And I wanted to welcome you to Exhibition Makers Volume 5. This was a project that I created for the museum for the programming, because I'm always curious about kind of the behind the scenes of everything, from how things are made to how things are thought of to how things are cooked, and I also think that sometimes what we do as different players within the cultural ecosystem is not clear, so people see an exhibition, but they don't know how that exhibition really, the journey that these works made. And I was just telling one of our visitors that I really am one of those believers that, at night when we turn off the lights, the paintings kind of talk to each other. They're like, I don't agree with where Abaseh put me. And, I think you got a better positioning. So I always try to be really, really kind to the works. I think that will keep any bad juju from happening to them. So tonight, this is really special because I have Maria Rendón, who is an artist and has been a person that I respect very much because she's been very involved in my journey coming to Santa Barbara. She was one of the first people I met. Her husband, Robert Jalma, was on my search committee. So it's very special to have you and to talk about your beautiful work and your journey as an artist. And one of the other reasons for creating this exhibition maker model was to pull in colleagues around town who are doing wonderful exhibitions and programs, and we have a directors meeting where we all meet, but then other people don't get to hear about these wonderful things. And so it gives a platform to hear what our colleagues are doing together. And so we have Judy, the director at Westmont, and we're really thrilled about that. And Bob, I had the pleasure of meeting Bob and Siri thanks to an event that we did here with them, where they invited their friends, and it was my first exhibition. And I got to speaking to Bob and Siri, and since then they have gotten a restraining order.
Not soon enough.
Not soon enough. And I use a blocked phone number, so sometimes Bob just has to answer that phone because he thinks it's something really important, and it's really me trying to get to Siri. And I thought it was really nice to have Bob talk about their collection, and in particular where the passion starts. And the collection is not contemporary. And again, the reason not everything has to be contemporary. It's about the passion. What matters to me as a curator and to our team and how we approach every project, whether it be curatorial or programmatic, is the passion. How do we arrive at the work we do? Why do we do this, what we do here? So with that, I want to thank the three of you for being present. I did send some questions earlier, just as a guidepost, not to follow it. But I think what I would really love is if we just start I see a lot of friends in the audience, but for those that might not know you, maybe we just start briefly saying a little bit about yourself and about your practice and your passion, and do that, and then we go into the other questions. We'll start with you.
My name is Maria Rendón. I was born and raised in Mexico City. Got a graphic design degree in Mexico City in 87, and then shortly after that I moved to Pasadena, California, where I studied illustration, Art Center College of Design. I was an illustrator for about 18 years, and then in 2012 I went back to school to get an MFA at MCASB. And in 2014 I graduated and have been painting and doing a little bit of installation and some sculpture since then. My passion, I guess, it's looking and at art and looking at painting and painting. I think primarily that's almost all I do. Other than walking. But
Yeah, that's a good start. Yes.
I went to college as an American history major and realized about my senior year that I should have majored in art history because I learned more history from the paintings than I did from the textbooks I was reading. So I've been trying since then to catch up for that education that I lacked. Both my wife and I are from the East Coast and worked in New York, so we had a great opportunity to go to museums in New York and travel to Europe. And we didn't start collecting until about 20 years ago. And we started, got one painting, 19th century American landscape art, and my wife's series here tonight finds great places in the house to put these things, and we look really good. We started to get some more things, and the more you buy, the more you study, the more you learn, the more interested you are in that particular field, and so we've been collecting American landscape, second half of 19th century paintings since then, so that really is a passion for our collection. We collect some other things, Japanese bamboo baskets and Shinhanga prints, but in terms of painting, it's American landscape principally. Judy?
Thanks. Well, my story starts when I was 10 years old, and the Los Angeles County Museum of Art opened a new building on Wilshire Boulevard, and for some unknown reason, my father, we were not an artsy family, said, let's all get in the station wagon and go check this place out. It was my first time in an art museum. And I can remember grabbing my mother's hand and whispering to her, I think these are real paintings. Really, this epiphany for me. It was like I had gone into a sanctuary. I cannot describe it, even at 10. I remember that. So then fast forward 15 years, my very first job was at Los Angeles County Museum of Art. I worked in the conservation lab, doing research with all the conservators, and particularly enjoyed working with the painting conservator, who's become a friend. We're still close today. It's a wonderful way to learn about painting if you're not a painter, because you start by looking at the back of the painting. Most people don't do that. And I just learned so much. Ultimately, I did a PhD at Emory University in Atlanta. I was at the Heim Museum. I worked on some wonderful exhibitions there. But my passion, I think, I found it when I became director of the Women's Museum in Washington, D.C. Because Linda Nachman's famous question is, why weren't there more women artists? And after working at the Women's Museum, I would say, why were there so many, given all the obstacles? You know, their lack of access to the academy and to education. So I learned so much there, and sort of that passion has stayed with me. My area of expertise is American 19th century, but I think for a lot of people who start in the 19th century, you just end up with the art of your time. So I really do enjoy contemporary art.
I think that's a great start, and I thank you, Judy. That was, I mean, really beautiful by all three of you. I think that's a nice point of departure to talk about contemporary painting. What is painting? Why is painting kind of considered the medium that's most cherished, and other mediums come in and they seem to be king for a day or queen for a day, but then it always ends up with painting. But at the same time, painting is considered the most conservative one of the group. Pricing, it's the one that does the best. How do you define painting, and why painting? Why were you attracted to painting as your medium?
I was thinking about that question. What is a painting? I guess a painting is something that exists on a wall. It's a shallow picture plane that we experience as just in front of it. I think that's as basic as it gets. And I'm a little troubled by differentiating painting and other types of painting, or other types of art, and distinguishing or isolating painting and installation or sculpture. I think we should be, in my opinion, we should be asking about art in general. Like, does whatever we're looking at, it might be a sculpture, an installation, or painting. Does that thing that we have in front of us moves us, as opposed to arguing if painting is dead or still alive, or I think it's such a it's an old, I guess, form of visual art, and it's universal, and it's almost futile to discuss. Why is it dead, or is it alive? I think it's, I don't know.
I agree. I wouldn't want to denigrate photography or sculpture or ceramics or textile or any other medium, but for me, painting is a connection to history. If you look at the great museums of the world, or the National Gallery, or the Uffizi, or Prado, the Hermitage, they're basically painting galleries. And so when you're collecting painting, even though our paintings aren't of that caliber, you feel you're part of this historical continuum that's been going on for centuries as a way of expressing yourselves and things that people can look at and admire. So it does have that distinction for it.
Judy, how would you connect it to the contemporary, like this history, this beautiful history that is connecting?
Well, I can tell you one of my favorite artists when I was at UCLA was Roger van der Weyden. And that Roger van der Weyden at the Getty Museum, I mean, I just had to go visit it all the time and just look at it. It is so exquisite. It is so jewel-like. It is so beautiful. And yet those are not words we really use today to describe painting. But there is something about paint that is wonderful. And it's hard to put it into words, I find. I've been thinking about this. I think Marlene Dumont calls it's messy. And I thought there is something wonderful about it. How many of us did finger painting and couldn't wait for the time, you get into that juicy material? I think Ken Dempsey said it was like the skin. It was that essential. So there's something magical about when you squish oil paint onto a canvas and create something representational. That it's not a continuum that like the baton has been passed, but I think there's a thread that does hold it all together, and I agree with you that I think painting has been declared dead because when I was at UCLA in the 1970s, like the 60s and 70s, at UCLA painting, that was the mantra: painting is dead. But if you think what was happening in the 70s, it was Vietnam War. I mean, there was so much going on that was radical. I think maybe the deadness is that painting couldn't keep up with that, and so there were so many other forms. But painting has changed a lot now, and I think it'll always be with us. It'll always be powerful.
And I think when you could say that making a painting, a traditional painting now, is more of a radical gesture than doing something out of the box. Just in I guess in contemporary days, doing a traditional painting would be to me more radical than something louder.
Tell us a little bit about the medium you use and how you do your work. How do you approach your work? And how is it you did your MFA here at UCSB? We've collaborated a lot with University of California, Santa Barbara. How is the program? Do they focus? Is there a particular line that they take? What has been your kind of educational training that led you to pick this medium and this path?
It was, the way that I paint is, I paint horizontally, I paint on the floor with very liquid material on panel, paper, vellum, all kinds of surfaces. It's very experimental. And I don't have anything in mind before I start making my paintings. It's a lot of it is reacting to the material. A lot of the times, things happen on the sidelines that tend to be more important than what the original object that I'm creating is. So, or during the process, something happens that becomes more important than the original piece. So I feel like I have developed this way of working that has been through experimentation. I didn't have necessarily a guide, so much guidance in the MFA program. I think I look at a lot of painting, a lot of work, but then when I go into the studio, I go into my own world, and it's me and my paint and my materials. So it's hard to answer that question in terms of guidance or the program at UCSB was great about discussing art in general and in the big picture, but not in specific painting.
Bob, you talked about the beginning, the beginning of the collection, but can you talk about how you developed it and how do you look and how do you search for the paintings that make up the collection, and what are your intentions? What are your intentions towards painting and sharing your passion?
Well, the first thing we always look for is visual beauty. And thus in all art, and this sets us apart from people like political art or conceptual art or performance art necessarily. If I see something, it has to sort of attract me at first and then linger with me. And the best way to know you want a painting is if you look at it and leave the gallery, leave the auction house and say, gosh, I'm sorry I don't have that. I'd like to get that. And the paintings we have, even though they're from the same period, a lot of different artists, but they're all rather calm, which again reflects our taste and our personality. We look at them and we're soothed by them. We're not agitated by them. They're paintings you can live with. So when we have a collection, we buy paintings, it's really for the long-term things that we're happy to have around us become part of our lives. And then the more you buy, the more you know, the more auctions you go to, the more galleries you go to, the more you're familiar with this area of art. And that's one reason that even though we have some contemporary pieces and have some very ancient pieces, we tend to focus on this narrow 1850 to 1900 era because it gives some consistency to what we're collecting, and the knowledge we've acquired in the past comes to play in what you're looking for and what you see when you go to an auction house or gallery in the future. So it gives a focus to the collection, which also then makes sense in your decoration, in your house, in your gallery. If it's not just a hodgepodge of things, it's all one kind of thing. So that's really, the artist can be important. It's someone I've heard of that's good, but if a piece that's really good by an artist you've never heard of, then you want to find out about that artist. In the 19th century, there were a lot of still unfamous or undiscovered artists that were extremely good painters, because that was a real time for real painting, so that you can learn and acquire and collect and build up your collection that way.
Judy, I'm just so curious because I didn't know when the passion started. So it started so early, and you've had this tremendous curriculum working at the Women's Museum, and now at Westmont, where you have both the artistic and the educational. How is that manifesting itself? Particularly your passion, your expertise. How is it manifested in the programming that you do, and in the kind of the educational side of it? I know that you teach as well. And what is it that you see in these new generations that are pursuing the education and, you know, studying to their art history degrees or museum study degrees?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because we, even though we're a small museum, we try to do all periods, all media. We've done Corot, we've done Impressionism, we've done contemporary painting. And I think it's important that students are exposed to that kind of work. Probably when we do our senior capstone exhibits every year, I think there have been a couple of years recently where there were no painters. It's like, and maybe it's what you were saying up top, it's viewed as like, well, everybody can do that, or it's old or something. Everyone wants to be a conceptual artist or do an installation or something that they view as avant-garde, and that's not necessarily painting. When we do have students that do paintings, they're really kind of rooted in figurative or realism, which is great, but sort of that ability to experiment and to understand abstraction. I remember we did have one artist who said, I am going to be an abstract artist. He went out and bought panels that were 8 feet by 5 feet and bought 5 of them, and after about a week, he said, this is really hard. Because I think a lot of students think, like, well, how hard is abstraction? Just kind of throw the paint like Jackson Pollock did, you know, but to really come out with something that's not mud, I think it's difficult. So in teaching art history and when I teach museum studies, I really want them to understand the physical objects. So I spend a lot of time talking about not just oil painting, but so that they can understand pastels, oil pastels, watercolors. There's so many different ways of painting, spray painting, tagging, all of that is painting. And we have a Chinese artist who paints with fireworks. I mean, it's like literally the sky's the limit. So yeah, I really do enjoy the students. I do.
Can I ask you selfishly, how do you deal with that question of anyone can do that? Because it's interesting, you know, I often am in the gallery and I listen to people, and you do get viewers that come and they're like, I can do that. How do you tackle that?
Well, it's sort of going back to that same student. He basically worked on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that order until he had them done. And literally, I think the 5th one was his best one. And so I think, like, thinking it's not so easy. You have to put thought. There still is color and composition and brushwork, or no brushwork. I mean, there has to be thought. And he eventually, I think the first 2, they look like mud. And that's the hardest thing, I think, when you're first dealing with color abstraction is it's not as easy as it looks. And so just let the students at it, you know. And yeah, we all have people say, you know, well, tell me why my 2-year-old, you know, couldn't do that. And we'll say, yeah, if your 2-year-old can do that, we'd like to meet her.
Maria, as I know you, I know that you spend a lot of time also educating yourself, or just more than educating, maybe just soaking in, and you go to a lot of exhibitions, you listen to a lot of artists. How do you feel, how do you see the shift in how painting, whether it be contemporary, modern, you know, we were discussing this, or from earlier, is being regarded now, like this present moment from when you became a visual artist? How does that impact how you're doing your work and how you want to see your career develop as a painter? Does these forces, particularly these market forces, or the fact that people keep claiming that painting is dead, except that it isn't? If we look at the latest auctions, what the Hockney sold for, what even contemporary artists are picking, are getting for paintings, and even female artists recently, the prices have soared. How does that all swirl around you as you try to do your work?
I think the institution, the art institution, is the one that decides that painting is dead or alive, not not us as individuals going into standing in front of a painting and being moved by it. So I think that's the difference. I think when you look at a painting and it moves you, or a painting or a piece of art and it moves you, I think that's what's important. It's not. I'm not saying that. I mean, we're all in the part of the art canon, I guess, and we can't. But the art, the institutions are the ones that declare painting, that if painting is dead or alive, and not our experience in front of the painting. I don't know if that's making sense. And I think it's important for us to think about that interaction with the object in front of us, as opposed to paying too much attention at the art world defining what's happening with painting. There's a poem that I wrote recently of the editor of the Brooklyn Rail. I don't know if you know who he is. His name is Fong Hui. He wrote a poem about Vijay Selman's show at the at the Met Royal. And one of the lines, it says, "How can a concentration of such modesty be so supreme in its grandeur?" And I think that's what I'm trying to say. Like when you are in front of an object that brings you to tears, that's, I think, what's important in terms of looking at art and experiencing art. We shouldn't be thinking about the art world or what the art world says or what the experts say. And if you ask me, that's basically how when I go into the studio, I want to make something that hopefully is going to move somebody. And first, that is going to move me, and then later, if that is going to move somebody. Hopefully as many people as possible.
I think that's really true, but I know I'm the moderator, but as I'm also the curator of the painting exhibition here, I'll share with you all, I really, I resisted starting with painting. I actually battled it. Also, sadly for many, my nature of just going against the grain of certain things that, people wanted painting from the beginning. I kept hearing that Santa Barbara wants painting, something I'd like to talk about. And I felt that all the mediums should be presented. And I knew that I was going to present painting because more than even painting, I love drawing. Drawing has been the most special for me. Drawing is really what moves me because it's just the most naked part of it. And so the Dash's commuter works, which are the works on paper in the Norton Gallery, were really what moved me about her work, and then took me to her paintings. It was these works that for her are equivalent of drawing. It's just that she feels that the pencil creates a distance. The pencil or the pen creates a distance between you and the paper. So she wanted to eliminate that and just create these objects with her hand, because they are folded pieces of paper that she travels with for months at a time and just keeps touching and folding and refolding, and they travel and they kind of take the essence of life with her. And then when they start fraying is when she takes it back into the studio and decides to place some distance between the work and her, kind of first of all sealing in her life, and by injecting it with ink, whether it be oil and sealing it, and then it's hung in the way that she determines. But I think that I think quite honestly, it's kind of one of those, I don't know. I think it's part of, like, as you said, the art world gimmick, and I'm curious to hear you guys the same question. To say painting is dead because it just creates another platform for painting now. When another painting show is curated, and because painting has never been dead, it's never going to be dead. How do you maneuver through that as a collector and someone who appreciates it to the point of, I'd like for you to share creating a space, a gallery space, to present your works in such a respectful and beautiful way. How do you mediate kind of the same question about what's fashionable?
Well, I'm the last person to talk about the art market. We have here the director of the Sullivan Goss Gallery and curators from Heather James, and we have real professionals in the audience who experience this on a daily basis.
There's going to be a question and answer period. They can speak. We welcome.
But again, for me, as I say, I know what I like, and I keep my focus limited on that. And I go to museum shows, and I go to galleries, and I keep up with what's happening in contemporary art. And that's not what I'm interested in acquiring or looking at on a daily basis, so that I can come and go as it pleases. I'm a traditionalist. I'm stuck in the old world.
But the dialogue with your works is clearly there, and the history that connects it is there. The light in your paintings. That's manifested in contemporary painting in a different way.
But contemporary painting, we're getting, I think, gets confused when you have to mix representational painting with abstract art, and it's hard to talk about painting in general because Maria's work, which can be beautiful, I look at examples of Maria's work, and when I look at it, I'm looking for what's an object, and where's the dog, where's the light. I try to find something I can relate to in that, even though that's not her intention, that's not what she's doing. That's just sort of my bias in looking at the art. So let me pass it back to her.
I think also every time, like if everybody looks at that painting, not two people are going to experience it the same way, because we all bring our histories, our education, our hang-ups when we're experiencing a work. So you're right. I think it's a very individual interaction with an object.
Judy?
Well, I think I learned a lot when I worked on the Corot exhibition. Corot was probably one of the most popular collected painters of the 19th century. And he's also credited with compositions that were influential to the Cubists. So there were the underpinnings there of modernism within Corot, and I think those were the paintings that a lot of us are attracted to. But while Corot was alive, the ones that sold the best were the great big paintings of nymphs dancing around a pond. I don't think those have much appeal today. So I think part of this is trends and tastes. I also think about someone, I worked on a big show of the American painter Taubman, and a lot of people found, a lot of collectors, if you could respond to this, he's too modern for the Impressionist collectors, and the Impressionist collector, vice versa too, that he became so minimal that a lot of Impressionist painters don't want his works, and vice versa, they're not pretty enough. So I think a lot of these things, over time, tastes change, and you do see paintings in different ways, and it goes with collectors as well.
But you can still see New England in Taubman's work. And that's one thing. Coming from her knees, that's how I relate. This is the woods I like to walk through. This is snow scenes that I'm familiar with the pond. So it has that connection still.
Also, can somebody take a stab at trying to define what contemporary is? Contemporary painting or contemporary art is what is being made right now, right? But in 1,000 years, people are going to be making art, and it's going to be of the time, and it's going to be contemporary. So has anybody answered that? What is contemporary?
It's a good question. It's sort of like, what followed modernism? It's like, what was the new title going to be? Maybe I cheat, but I just think of it as art of our time. And I was asking someone once about who's your favorite old master, and she said Rauschenberg. Yes, he is a movement, so it's always changing, right?
How about contemporary being unproven art? I mean, modern art seems to be something that has been accepted into a canon, or people agree on this was good, this was good. I mean, contemporary is stuff that still has to stand the test of time.
Yeah, I think, well, Abaseh sent us an article, the New York Times article, of like, there were, I don't know if you want to describe it, it's a 25 pieces that define the art era, I guess, the contemporary art era. And it's defined by 5 people. It's 3 artists and 2 curators. And they discussed that if 5 other people would have had the same conversation, they would have come up with 25 completely different people. So it's like, that's almost impossible to think who the 5. But reading that list or looking at all those artists, I felt like most of the work had to do with some social and political issues, and also a lot of work that has to do with human condition. So I don't know if that's what defines contemporary.
We have another artist in that we have a lot of expertise in the audience.
By the way, it's really nice to see a lot of fellow painters in the audience. So I think everybody should pitch in.
Yeah, the microphone is open and we can go to questions beforehand. I do want to discuss our responsibility, because we are in a museum, and for many of you that know me, I do feel that a museum is simply an extension. It is a social good that costs and has to be nurtured and loved and subsidized and supported. But much like university education, school education, it is just something that I believe that's why the different shows and the diverse mediums that were presented, because through it, by seeing that diversity, you will find something that speaks to you. Not every show is going to be to everyone's liking. Not hopefully what is always consistent is quality, is the way the work is presented with respect, and that one makes the effort to present art that is communicating beyond just the pigment or the paint or the substance. But what is our responsibility as artists, as curators, as collectors, who are choosing to show their collection to a group, sharing it, possibly, maybe in the future, giving it a public home, maybe? What is our responsibility to help people kind of have more compassion and understanding and wanting to embrace this as something that they want to go on a journey, and through it kind of find the art that speaks to them, like yours spoke to you?
Let me ask you in that regard about the current show by N-Dash, which there are no wall labels up, and the pieces you talk, the computer pieces in there, you explain what they are, but if you don't know what they are, it's very hard to understand what they are. On the converse, there are shows that you go to in some museums where the label itself is the art. You can't tell what the artist is trying to do until you read this long description of her troubled upbringing and how she's taking this out on her father in this piece. So I guess my question to you or Judy is, what is the medium or between saying nothing because the artist just wants you to experience the work by itself without an explanation, and over-explaining or having to explain the work? So maybe
I'll answer the specific on this, and then Judy can do the bigger picture. On this show particularly, and on all the exhibitions that have been curated during my tenure as director, firstly, there is a gallery guide with a map, with all the wall labels, with their dimensions and all of that. There is a text. Often it's longer. This is the shortest one because of
Because the
artist, there were discussions back and forth, and Dash is very, very specific and particular about the way she wants certain things communicated, but in previous exhibitions, the exhibition text is quite lengthy and very accessible, if you ask me. But I would leave that to everyone's judgment. I personally, it's a completely curatorial decision not to put wall labels and present it in a sheet form and on the website. It's an aesthetic thing. So it's a peeve. So I don't think my way is the right way. It's just curatorially. I find artists to be these special creatures that have these abilities that me mortal doesn't have. And so when I as the curator am curating their exhibition, I guess it's my way of paying respect is to it's in a way putting it on a pedestal. And so I don't want anything to distract you from this beautiful work that someone has given so much of their life and energy and passion to create for us. And so I feel that if I can achieve the same by making a handout and putting a QR code, doing all these other things that I do, and also at this museum we do, and I know that you do as well, we place a high premium on working with our gallery ambassadors, our interns, and in particular the engagement, Briar, who's the first beautiful face you see when you come into the museum, about really learning to talk and wanting to engage. Because particularly as the contemporary museum that is smaller, less known in the community, firstly because of our history, the changes, the location, whatever, we really want to engage with people. We every Monday Monica sends out the I knows, and we read about interactions. They take notes on what people said, the rejections, that it really matters to us to really analyze and see what are people thinking, what is upsetting them, what do they want, because this is a museum for the community. It's a 44-year-old institution, and I guess we take it seriously by honoring and trying to hear what it is that they want from us. They might not like every exhibition, but we approach it from that perspective. So I hope I answered the question. Judy?
Well, and I get it, I understand, there is a certain, what's the right word? It's sort of exquisite just to have the paintings on the wall, against a white wall, and they speak for themselves. But I work at college, and if you've been to Westmont, you know that my office is right here when you walk in the door, so I hear a lot of comments. And I've had students open the door and say, oh, this is a modern art show, I don't like it. They just walk out. And so I feel like part of my job as an educator is to give them just a toehold. And it's hard to write a label. People, I mean, I have worked with art historians who say, I'm going to write my own labels for this show. I'm like, great. And then they give me a dissertation, and they're so thickly written, they don't make any, well, they do make sense to somebody, but a student is going to stop and read all that. A good label should, make 3 points and maybe ask a question. It shouldn't be descriptive because the piece is right in front of you. You don't need anyone to tell you it's blue. You can see that it's blue. So it should ask some questions, and particularly for those who are novices. I think it's why museums kind of get a elitist reputation, because we assume everyone who comes in is part of the, the handshake or something. And people, if they want to learn, just, give them something. I think it's perfectly fine to have a handout at the desk. I wonder how many people would actually...
We force it on people. I don't have any problem with dictatorship, so, we really, we drive the point, and we really do, we really engage. I mean, the particular personalities needed to work at this museum. We're not shy. But I want to open, Maria, do you want to say it? I would like to open it we're so lucky.
I only speak because it's better recorded, because you're being recorded. And by the way, I would like, before we switch it to the audience and all the wonderful artists and colleagues that we have, and everybody who has an opinion to share it with us, the frames on your paintings. once you sent me the write-up and I was reading, and then I thought about the frames, and that I thought that was a beautiful story, and I have to say that some of the frames were very contemporary. And so I found a little, so can you talk a little bit about the frames of your paintings?
Sure. We learned a little later in our collecting that paintings, if you're going to have a serious collection, should have a period frame with it. And ideally, if you have the original frame that came with it, that's a couple extra points for you. And galleries will make reproduction frames that reproduce the fluted code moldings of the 19th century, or there are dealers that have antique frames. So we've tried to match paintings with frames in our collection where we can, and then once you start getting nice frames, then all of a sudden you have to have all nice frames, because if something isn't nice, it stands out from the crowd, so you end up going to restorers or going to t-shirts to look for comparable frames. But that was, again, another learning process. It wasn't just the paintings and the artists you learn about, but you learn about what were the frames that the artists used in 1870 versus 1890. It's like women's hairstyle. You can date something by the exact style of the frame.
And do you open your collection to people viewing it? Do you share it?
When were you thinking of?
I think it's just a beautiful. I just think you've created such a beautiful space, and it's just so respectful. It just shows your respect for the art beyond it being.
Yeah, for those who haven't been to our place, our house is built on a hillside, so we have a basement to hold the house up. And when we sold our house in Minnesota, we had no place for our paintings to go, and so I asked my wife, could we turn our empty basement into an art gallery? And she said, sure, why not? So it looks like a real gallery, even though it's the basement of a residential house up in Montecito. And I love sharing it with people. I mean, the parking's limited, but
We can bus.
yeah. We've had groups from the Santa Barbara Museum of Art over there, and we love talking about it and showing it. One of the great things about having a collection is sharing it. I mean, who wants to just have it for yourself? I'd love to have more people appreciate it.
That's wonderful. Do we have some questions in the audience? Oh, yes, Alex, come do it with.
I can have.
Okay.
I have the sort of devil's advocate position question, and this is coming from a lover of painting and a daughter of a painter and a supporter of painters. But I'm curious about this discussion around the death of painting, which, you know, it's like every 10 years painting is dead and then there's a revival. And I agreed with Marie's statement about one of the more kind of revolutionary things one can do at this stage is paint. And I'm thinking of artists like Rendón and Carrie James Marshall. But I'm wondering if it's actually that the history of painting and the language, the variety of languages that painting has come to represent is so burdensome for artists that they cannot undertake it as a medium.
On the comparison.
You mean that a lot of it has been done already? Is that what you're saying?
That, but also what it's come to represent for different communities, what it represents on the art market. I mean, the fact that painting is what's going to always be getting the highest, you know, grabbing the highest bid and attention and accessibility, and, you know, has that become a language that's too difficult for artists? And I don't mean necessarily like young contemporary artists, but just in general. And I think in the past, there have been movements where what painting represents was too heavy for people to undertake, and so, you know, post-impressionists, they kind of navigated through that with painting. But are we at a stage where there is no navigation through that, and it's just the language is too heavy, it doesn't represent who they are, what they're coming from?
I don't know much, but one of my teachers said all art history is a pendulum, it's a reaction. They're always reacting against what the previous generation was doing. And so that will always occur. So if we're not in a big painting phase now, then probably the next one will be, because that will be seen as different or revolutionary. The revolution is always appealing to artists, and the revolution is always something that wasn't done by the prior group. So things will come and go always, I think.
Judy?
I'd like to actually add to that question. I think when we talk about, I think you're right about.
Say who you are, John.
Oh, hi, John Millay.
Artist, painter.
Painter. So, tennis player. So, I don't agree. I don't agree with the disproven. But what I do agree with is that the modernists didn't call themselves modernists. The abstract expressionists didn't call themselves expressionists. The pop artists absolutely rejected the word pop art. These are labels that are post-production. And I think what we're in is a long period of production where no one's been able to name it, so they're calling it contemporary, because it's incredibly complex. It has great diversity and pluralism, and I think it's very hard to define. And then one further thing, when people talk about painting being dead, I think it's generationally a set of questions become exhausted. And when those questions become exhausted, those particular people proclaim it dead because it's ran out of juice that they're curious about. And the next generation has another set of questions. We're dealing with identity politics and these things, and those questions are vital. And therefore, art is alive for those people interested in those questions, painting being one of those mediums. So I really think it's just a matter of how questions have a validity, and then they lose, or they become exhausted, or overworked, or overexposed. And then once that happens, we start to name those periods post-mortem, essentially.
The two examples that you gave, one Andy Wiley, he's a portrait painter. I mean, that's pretty traditional, and yet when those Obama portraits went up at the portrait gallery, it more than doubled their attendance. Was it because of the Obamas, or was it because they were pretty sensational portraits? I mean, both. And the other, Kerry James Marshall, he really is a history painter. And so really these ways of defining paintings, all those traditions are still there. It's just the artists are taking them and, you know, using Alberti's perspective, but doing crazy things with it, or just making us see things in a new way. And I think those are the artists who sort of bubble up as wow, that now I'm seeing something new.
I also think there's, and we sort of touched about this, there is this sort of commercial element to all of this. And what does the market say is the hottest thing, or what do the critics say? And they're always looking for something new. So, an artist looking for something new. I mean, they're, by virtue of who they are, they're trying to be creative and say something. And a lot has already been said in painting. But there are a lot of artists who still have something to say in painting, but it's not as shocking or interesting, or you can't really build it into the latest articles in the media. And so whether it's video art, photography, and there's new technology, and there's much more to talk about sometimes, but I don't think it may be harder. I mean, I think it is harder, and you use the word burden, to think of painting if you really feel you have to have a breakthrough, or you have to be so unique, and you have to have a gallery, or the gallery showing your works. That's hard.
Yeah.
But certainly the validity of painting as a way of human expression, I think, has been with us forever, and certainly many artists still find that to be the best way for them.
Do our commercial colleagues, it would be interesting, do you have any thoughts to share from the, we have kind of two legs present here, but the third leg is you all on the commercial side. Any comments to make? No? Is that me putting you on the spot? Do we have any closing thoughts on painting?
I still think that, I wanted to say something about Kathy Wilkes.
Yeah.
Kathy Wilkes is I guess, a contemporary painter. She represented England or Wales in the Venice Biennale in 2019. But I didn't know anything about her. I was at Frieze in LA, and my goal when I go to big fairs is to find the most beautiful jewel-like painting, and sometimes it's really hard to find. But I was, going back and forth, and I saw this little painting by her, and it was really small. It was a mound. And with a horizon line, but it had such beautiful materiality and surface and beautiful history to the surface. And then I later found out who she was and how she does installations and stuff. But I think that connection with an object that you can at some point find this painting that brings you to tears. I think that's universal, and I think that, I don't know if that's ever changed from the very beginning of the cave paintings. And so I'm hoping that it continues forever, but I think, I don't know, that's...
Yes.
I have a comment about that. I'm Hugh Marjoram, I'm a painter, but I think as a society, our definition of beauty is always changing. So, for instance, sort of universally, what we agree on, like a Dutch still life, is something that we think is gorgeous. Painting of apples on a table and a bottle and a light. But when those were painted, those were almost heretical. The things that were considered beautiful then and acceptable were religious paintings. You don't paint everyday objects like that. And then so as art history advances, someone like skipping way ahead to Rauschenberg, he paints his bed, his crappy bed, and he slathers it with paint, or he finds a tire in the street. And it's like something, no, that's not beautiful, that is ugly. But he changes the way we see things, and he elevates what we think is ugly into something that now is revered in a museum. And the same thing with someone like Andy Warhol. It's like, that's not beautiful, that's just crap we see every single day. But it's really, what it's really doing, whether it's painting, whether it's sculpture, whether it's photography, whether it's conceptual art, is changing the way we see, and that's the real crux of what we're all trying to do here.
Yes, Lisa.
Warren, thank you all for being here. And what I love about art is nights just like this, with all these different, this is what art is, to bring people together, whether it's traditional, contemporary, and hearing everyone's thoughts about it. And that's one of my favorite things about art, is that it's open for everyone, for their interpretation, how it touches them, how it feels them, whether it's a tire on a painting, a traditional painting, something you don't understand. I love when I see someone see a piece of art that does something to them. And it can be any kind of art, but as long as it stimulates them and opens up discussion and shares ideas and values and community, I think it's a wonderful thing. It's so wonderful we have it here and have all you here to share that. And that's what I love about art. Seeing what different art does with different people, whether it's a lover, a beautiful painter, a lover of contemporary art, a traditionalist. And I love how art touched you at 10 years old. I think it's a beautiful thing. I love hearing stories like that. So thank you.
Well, I think that's a nice way to finish by with those comments. Thank you so much to everyone for coming tonight, and I think share your thoughts and what you want to see and what you how you want things communicated. We're all here and open, all of us. We strive to have people with respect share their comments with us. And John, I said this when I met you at Maria's house. I knew that there was, I knew something connected us, but I didn't know. And it's kind of very special to me that you're here. A small anecdote, in 2004, I curated my first show for the U.S. Ambassador and the United States United States mission in Mexico City, meaning our embassy. And I combined works from the Arts and Embassies program, which is the program that we have in the United States government to send artwork to the different residences at our embassies, around the world. But I borrowed from some local collectors, and one of them is a very prominent collection called the Jumex collection. At the time, I didn't know that someday I'd have the privilege of being the director, and I borrowed one of your works, one of your paintings for that. So I brought him the book, which is a little tattered, but he was in one of my first, public shows that were on view. So it's so special to have you here.
And he has a show in LA these
Yes.
days.
Any other announcements we can announce? Let's pick the date. Judy, what's up at Westmont?
Actually, we have a video installation up, but it's only up for a few more days, and then we're going to be showing works on paper from the Texas Corpus Christi Museum, and these are all modern works, but prints and drawings. I think it'll be nice.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much.
Wait.
Oh,
I have a show at in Joshua Tree in February. It opens February 8th. It's a 2-person show.
where?
Joshua Tree, it's Hey There Gallery. It's a gallery that some colleagues from our center opened in last June or so.
Okay. So we have a lot, and we just want to share with you. We put engaged brochures. We have wonderful scholar talks coming up in the next several weeks. One on Adobe, one on pigment. Kind of it's what I call the MacGyver side of what we do, and I love knowing. So I think you would really enjoy these scholars conversations. Please come and support them. And participate. Let us know what else you would like to see so that we can incorporate it into the program. Thank you.